Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. It's Tuesday, the 16th of April, 2024. Today, we're going to talk about an issue that's been happening with Intel and AMD CPUs. So I want to say right out of the gate, if you're one of those really nasty people who thinks you're superior because you selected a different product, you're wrong. Please don't be that guy. So if you have a Gigabyte Asus, MSI, or ASRock motherboard, it affects you regardless if you have an AMD or an Intel CPU. It's just how it affects, or the way that you identify it changes. So today we're going to focus on the Intel side. Essentially what's happening are the latest generation, and specifically 13th and 14th gen CPUs are the Intel CPUs are the first to demonstrate this particular failure. I suspect AMD's not far behind, and this only deals with the latest chips from both manufacturers because recently motherboard manufacturers decided it was okay, and apparently the chip makers thought it was okay, for them to send as much voltage as possible to your CPU at all times under stress with no limit with regards to how long it'll tolerate that. So the early results of seeing this are that the CPU is hard to cool. And even if you're not overclocking it, even if you don't have an unlocked CPU, even in the case of, we're going to stick to Intel on this video, and we're not going to talk anymore about AMD. AMD requires its own video. It's the same exact problem. Today, we're focusing on Intel. Any socket 1700 Intel chip specifically, you might find difficult to cool. That's your first warning sign. If you let a CPU run hot over a period of time, it degrades the longevity of the CPU. It reduces its life. I don't think anybody thought it would reduce the life of the CPU so significantly, although officially the word's not out. It looks pretty common sense to me. Now, my assumptions and predictions may be completely incorrect with regards to what's causing the failures that some people with Intel chips are saying. Not the majority, but still some are experiencing failures. And my guess is these people that are experiencing the failures are running the chips quite hot. And over 2-3 months of running them that hot, they're experiencing failures. NVIDIA has even come out and said, this isn't our drivers. This is happening, I guess, during some gameplay. And sometimes they get an out of video memory error. And it's very interesting because NVIDIA just says, contact your CPU manufacturer. So NVIDIA is already prepared for the AMD stuff that's likely going to follow. You simply can't run, in my opinion, in my experience in the industry, a CPU that hot every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, without significantly degrading the reliability and just the overall lifespan of the chip. It's just, it's too much for too long, and it's going to have an early failure. That seems inevitable. Now, what that failure is, I can't predict. But since these are the first failures we're seeing, I suspect the two are tied together. But even if they're not, you still don't want your CPU running hot all the time. And as I mentioned, well, people that buy Z-series motherboards and unlocked Intel processors look forward to perhaps overclocking them and overvolting them. The unsuspecting consumer buying locked Intel processors on B, not Z, but B as in boy, motherboards, are quite surprised when they see that they're being overpowered. The wattage that all of the board manufacturers are sending to the CPUs, the Intel 12th, 13th, and 14th gen CPUs, is well above the Intel recommended specifications, and Intel seems to be fine with it. Well, now that all this bad PR has come out and Intel engineers are looking into it, Intel engineers and Intel in general is being hush-hush about it. So we'll find out if these things are related, but nonetheless, I wouldn't recommend running a CPU hot except during, intensive tasks. So if you're running a gaming machine and you're doing that 8 hours a day, and you're constantly pushing the upper end of 90 degrees Celsius on a regular basis, I would definitely pay attention to this video, unless you're just flush with cash and you don't mind changing out your CPU. Now, the Intel RMA process I've heard is very smooth, and there's a warranty issue, they'll cover it. I expect and predict there's going to be a BIOS update that tunes this down. It won't be so extreme. And we'll see. These are early predictions. I don't know any more than anybody else what manufacturers of motherboards are going to do, or what the CPU manufacturers, how they're going to respond. And for all we know, and I can't emphasize this enough, the crashing that's happening with the CPU failures that were previously running fine for 2 to 3 months, these same processors that were great, suddenly have problems. And then getting a new CPU fixes the problem. And the only thing that's changed that I'm aware of is the motherboard manufacturer's attitude towards disrespecting the power levels recommended by both AMD and by Intel. That's my opinion on the matter. But I've also personally had issues with overheating. I've had issues where I built brand new 12th gen, 13th gen, and 14th gen machines and couldn't figure out why they weren't staying cool. And I would run my Prime 95 test on them, and I would put a different cooler on it. I'd go spend some more money, buy another cooler, and nothing seemed to make that big of a difference. So you can imagine I'm pretty upset by this, because I have put a lot of time and money into solving problems I shouldn't have had on boards that were using locked processors on non-overclockable boards. Every motherboard I've got in front of you today suffers this problem, as will any modern day socket 1700 or AM5 motherboard, provided we're dealing with the latest chips. All right, so right now I've got one of each, because unfortunately, to complicate matters, how each one of these manufacturers of boards is going to torture the hell out of your CPU changes where you have to go to turn that off. Some are a little clearer than others, and some are insanely complex. In my opinion, I don't mind if motherboard manufacturers want to do this. That's not the problem. The problem is unsuspecting customers are putting together systems that should just fire up and run using default specifications. That should be the out-of-the-box default. That's what it's always been in my entire career. For the first time ever, in an unprecedented, never before have I ever seen the entire industry shift to overvolting your CPU without telling you. And even if that CPU is a locked CPU on a non-overclockable motherboard, they're doing it across the board on Intel and AMD side. They're sending more voltage to the chip than the manufacturer recommends. And the immediate way you know this is occurring to you is your CPU seems to be running really, really hot, and you can't figure out why. And you might do what I did and spend money to buy expensive coolers and spend time to take the old cooler off, put the new cooler on, and then find out it didn't make that much of a difference after all. You might buy into the idea that these contact frames that go around the CPU sockets are what you need to buy. So you might spend more money on that. The blame for this is solely on the manufacturers, and perhaps on the CPU chip manufacturers for permitting it. Because if they've got the Intel logo on these boxes, they're doing so with Intel's blessing. So Intel apparently doesn't have a problem with it. But with Intel, and I'm guessing soon AMD are going to be replacing a lot of chips under warranty, their investors are going to be pretty ticked off at the financial loss. Then there's the PR issues they got to deal with. And then I think they have no choice but to talk to their motherboard partners and say, you guys can't do this anymore. If an end user wants to go in and crank that stuff up and fry their chip, then we have the option of honoring or not honoring the warranty. But when we're talking about a locked CPU on a non-overclockable motherboard, the last thing you would expect is your CPUs being, fried, electrified 2 to 3 times over what its recommended voltage settings are. A human being wouldn't survive that. I don't know much of anything that would survive that. So it seems to me that early failure with regards to the CPU quality degrading quickly is inevitable. What's hard to predict is just when it's going to happen. So part of that has to do with just how much voltage that particular silicon is getting, because each chip is different, along with how the machine's being used and how often. But it does seem inevitable. In some cases, the inevitability may be 30 years from now. In other cases, it could be 3 months from now. It's really hard to get any sort of a baseline here, other than to say before the motherboard manufacturers did this, you very rarely saw a bad CPU. I think in my entire career, I've seen a half dozen, maybe a dozen at most, bad CPUs, both from Intel and AMD equally. So it's pretty rare. I've been in the business over 30 years. So once every 3 years, maybe I see something like that. So to see a whole batch of them going bad, what's changed? You know, that's what you got to ask yourself. If it's been as solid as a rock in this regard for over 30 years, something must have changed. Well, don't look to Intel and don't look to AMD. Look to your motherboard makers. In front of me, I've got one of each board, as I previously mentioned, ASRock, MSI, Gigabyte, and Asus. And each one of these has a 13 or 14500, not a K. There's no, 600. It's not a 13600 or 14600K. It's just a mid-range i5 on a B series, B760. This one's a Z790, just to show you it doesn't matter. It makes no difference. This one's a B760 micro ATX, and this MSI stands as a little bit different. I do have another. I'm sure I have an MSI B760, but it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the chipset is. If you have a 12th, 13th, or 14th gen Intel chip, and you're having trouble keeping it cool, or you're wondering why is it running so hot, I'm going to show you how you can determine what's causing that, and then how to fix it with each motherboard manufacturer, because they don't do it the same. The only thing they do the same is they don't tell the user they're doing it, and it is the default settings out of the box, unless you are technical enough to know how to get into the BIOS, which a lot of people don't even know how to do that, and then how to find those settings, and then once you've found them, what to set them to. This is a pretty advanced technical exercise that's really well above the pay grade of your average consumer. Therefore, it should only be enabled by somebody with that knowledge. And it should be assumed that if it's not enabled, it's probably because that person doesn't have that knowledge, or if they do, they don't want to. And it should be set to factory defaults according to the manufacturer's suggested recommended settings. So I am just blown away that they would just disrespect any boundaries and just throw it out there. And their justification is, we want you to get the best performance possible. Okay. Well, I mean, if I want to see how fast I can go, I can jump out of an airplane and let gravity take me to the ground. But I think that's going to have an impact, literally, on how long I'm going to stay alive. So let's put this exercise into place, and let's take a look here, what to look for. Also, one other caveat is, even the different models of motherboards coming from the same manufacturer, excuse me, as well as the version of BIOS you have, means that what I'm about to show you may not match exactly the steps, even if the motherboard manufacturer that you have is the same as what I'm showing. Your BIOS could still be different. That just keeps complicating things. So I'm going to show you what I'm looking for, so that you're not just clicking along with me, but rather using your brain and your eyes to identify where the issue, where the settings are, what they're called. They also call them different things, and they put them in different places in the BIOS. And it can vary from one model to the other based on the version of the BIOS, even from the same manufacturer. Fun, right? Isn't this great? So I've got the ASRock board here to my left, your right. I suppose we need to start somewhere. And I think the first thing we need to do is we'll reset the BIOS, because I don't know where these motherboards are I've been messing around with them and I can't remember how I've left them. So we're going to fire them up. We're going to reset BIOS to defaults. And I'll show you the tools I use to verify temperature and where we're going to go in the BIOS to make that change. Okay, so anybody here in the chat room suffering a CPU that's running hot or even a CPU failure? More CPU failures are being reported in South Korea than here in the US currently. Just checking in the chat room. Hello, everybody joining us. Happy birthday to our friend Kelly Stewart. Oh, and also thank you, Kelly, for the Amazon gift card that was sent prior to the show. And thank you to our friends over at Acronis for offering you guys a 30% discount all throughout this year. And we'll have them back on the show to explore more of what Acronis can do with our friend Begowden in the weeks ahead. Jason, H88, has been a member now for 23 months. That is awesome. Thank you, Jason. He says, thank you for teaching us how to fix this issue. I hope Intel puts its foot down and forces motherboard manufacturers to turn this off. Well, the good news is, when you go to 15th gen and later, this isn't possible because the chip design has changed and you can't do this. So this is strictly a problem with 12th, 13th, and 14th gen CPUs. And one way or another, the problem goes away. It either Intel does nothing because there's not enough failures to justify it, in which case it'll just be this legacy of this generation of chip, because they're all basically the same generation. Some might argue 12th isn't really, but 13th and 14th are the same, for sure. Regardless, when the 15th gen comes out, this isn't even possible. So either avoid buying a 12th, 13th, 14th, or latest AM5 CPU, because the era you're living in right now, this is what all the motherboard manufacturers are doing, and wait and see if they address it. If they don't address it, hold off and wait to the next generation. I think the X3D series of AMD CPUs use chiplets, and when they're using chiplets, you can't really do this because it's too hard to stabilize the voltage between all the chiplets versus one big monolith chip, which is what Intel uses and has been using since forever. So the 15th gen is going to be significantly different and will bring challenges of its own because it'll be a first generation product. And like any first generation product, it's going to have issues probably for the first year that'll get worked out likely through BIOS updates and refinements. So that's just par for the course, I'm predicting. After a while, it just becomes like Groundhog Day, where you just, oh, here we go again, same thing again. So I'm ready, I'm prepared. I want you to be prepared. If I'm wrong, I will be pleasantly surprised. So prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Okay, so let me see here in the chat. I have a Z790 paired with a 13900K. Does this only affect B series boards? It affects all motherboards, all chipsets for socket 1700 and socket AM5 latest CPUs. I don't know how much clearer I can be on that. People would expect a Z series board and a K series processor to do this. That's why they buy them, to overclock them. Nobody expects a non-overclockable chip on a non-overclockable board to be overclocked. And technically, we're not overclocking. Technically, we're overvolting, but it's a way to get more performance out of the chip, which is the whole point of overclocking. So if we interchange these terms, they more or less, we're talking about the same end result, which is higher performance, which also results in higher heat. The difference that most people have is when you're buying a Z series motherboard and a K series chip, you're generally doing that so you can overclock it. That's why you're buying it. When you're buying a non-overclockable chip, you expect it, at least I do, to run at stock speeds. And if I paired it on a Z series motherboard and the motherboard had the ability to overclock, I might understand this a little better. But it shouldn't be overclocking, period, across the board, regardless of the chipset or the chip, without the user's express consent. And without such, it should be the default setting to be running at the stock manufacturer's settings. That's my opinion, and that's based on 30 years, over 30 years of being in the business, and this is always how it's been handled. It has never before been done like this. And it's like anything else new in first gen, they're learning right now as we speak, they're figuring this out. I think it's pretty obvious, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Now, I'm going to grab a power supply over here. We're going to fire this up. We're going to take a quick look. We're going to measure. We're going to determine if this is running hot. And then instead of trying to buy better thermal compound or contact frames or different coolers, there's a different way to fix this that'll cost you nothing. Take a fraction of the time. And will you be leaving some performance on the table? Well, you're going to still get the performance you paid for. So any additional performance you're getting through the overclock is really coming at a different type of expense. So in the sense that people feel like, well, I wouldn't want to undervolt my chip because, well, it's not undervolting, it's just putting it back the way the Intel specifications and engineers have recommended, because that means I'm going to lose performance. But you will gain reliability. You will have a chip that lasts longer. If you wanted a faster chip, just buy a faster chip, right? I mean, the whole point of this is that I could have bought a Core i9 13900K and a Z series motherboard, and this would have been acceptable, sort of. A little more expected anyway. But I didn't. These are B series chipsets with non-K, non-overclockable CPUs. And I shouldn't even have the option to overvolt them. That shouldn't even be on these boards. And not only is it an option, it's turned on by default without expressing this to you or without asking you for your permission and without disclosing it in the product page where you go to make the purchase, that this could shorten the life of your CPU and affect its performance out of the box the way it ships. That'd be a nice disclaimer to see across all motherboard manufacturers for both the latest AM5 and Intel chips. But you think they're going to do that? They want you to think that if you use our board, you'll get more out of your chip. So the other manufacturers go, well, we'll do that too. So they're all doing it now under the guise that you're getting free performance, which is coming at a price. So here we are dealing with it, and putting it back to stock is anything but simple. And even if the motherboard tells you it's back to stock, it may not be. You cannot believe what these motherboard manufacturers are telling you. It is either intentionally or unintentionally lying to you, or not working properly. Either way, I'm going to show you how you verify this. You don't want to take anybody's word for anything in 2024. Verify. If it's important to you, you need to find 2 or 3 sources of information to verify what you're reading is in fact real. It's not AI, it's not conjecture. There's so much of this going around right now that I would assume, unless the information is being provided to me from a trusted resource that I'm familiar with, I would definitely want to verify it before I go and tell anybody else. Otherwise, you're just propagating rumor and conjecture, which is, what, we don't have enough of that on the internet already? You got to add to it? Come on. When is enough enough? So if you want to be a part of that, you go right ahead. But for the rest of us, we want to get to the nitty gritty so we know. And then, you know, what other people's problems and beliefs are. That has nothing to do with me. So now, if I go over here, let me see. Let me bring up my OBS. Let's see. Okay. And we're going to turn on our HDMI input. This is the ASRock B760 Pro RSD4. I'm not going to list all these parts. Essentially, we've got a 13500 or 14500 chip and across these 4 boards. They all have DDR4 or DDR5, makes no difference. They all have a solid state NVMe, different manufacturer, different size, doesn't matter. And they're all using the boxed cooler that comes with the CPU. That's supposed to be adequate for that CPU. You should not have to buy a third-party cooler. It should be unnecessary if this is configured properly, except in extreme cases. So if we go to, and this doesn't affect laptops or mini PCs. This doesn't affect mobile chips. This is strictly a desktop chip problem, just to clarify. So let me go to my HDMI input. Here it is. And then let's put this in a corner. Let's go like that. And let's start with ASRock. So we'll turn this on. Okay, our fan is turning, and hopefully we'll get something up here on the screen in just a minute. And you can see I've already prepped these boards. At the time I put the latest BIOS on, it's possible a newer BIOS has come out. However, in order to speed this video along, I mean, we're a half an hour into it, and I still haven't gotten into any of the steps involved. So let's just try and push through this as quickly as possible. We have 4 board manufacturers to get through, and I'm going to do my best to speed through this, but hopefully be clear. So I've got a flash drive that I keep my utilities on, and these utilities are just free, downloadable, safe, portable utilities. You don't need to install anything, and you can download these utilities. Just go to Google and type the name of utility in, and make sure you're using one of the top links you're at the right site to make sure you're not getting an imposter. But the first link should be the real link if you type the name of the product incorrectly. If you type it in correctly, not incorrectly. All right, so let me go back to full screen on my side so I can see what the heck is going on. There's an update to the firmware of my Samsung drive. Oh, no, there isn't. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. There's a blue dot down here. Maybe there is. The Samsung Magician software has been updated to version 8.1. Oh, we have a nice Samsung 994 terabyte drive in here. Fancy. Okay. Well, I don't want anything to affect the outcome of this test, right? So I don't want somebody to say, well, that wouldn't have happened if you'd updated the Samsung Magician or if you'd have done the firmware update. So we're going to do that right now, which is going to require us, oh, well, failed. All right, let's do the next thing, the Magician software. This is what I'm saying, like as soon as I prep these boards, within a matter of, let's say, the 2 weeks it took me to get these ready, there may be new BIOS updates, Windows updates, Samsung firmware update, Samsung software update. Updating a Windows computer is a constant thing. These are not appliances. It's not like a toaster you can put in the closet for 3 months or 3 years and take out and start using it. They need to be updated because the internet is a living, breathing entity in a way, and it's always evolving and changing, and new threats are being discovered by the thousands every day, and bad actors are trying to think up other ways to scam you and be bad people. So these updates are there to protect you and to ensure your system runs reliably, securely, and runs fast. And sometimes the updates take it too far. Sometimes the updates will create and introduce new exploits and new problems that they didn't have before, which requires yet another update. Software, by definition, is never done. Just so you know, there's no such thing as a piece of software that's finished. There's either a software that's in development or a software that's shut down or obsolete. They've given up on it. It's not as simple as a wooden carving. It's something that is constantly evolving, and if it's not evolving, it's because it's dead. That's it. Those are your 2 choices. Now, the internet connection I have here is pretty slow. I'm actually surprised this is taking as long as it is. Unless unless it's asking me for something I'm not seeing. No? Taking a very long time. We're going to go ahead, and I want to make sure that, again, everything's updated and everything's running as it should be in order for the testing that I'm showing you to be consistent across all the boards. Not all the boards have Samsung drives. They're all different. All the RAM is different. The only thing they share is the latest 13th or 14th gen non-overclockable chip being overclocked on boards that don't overclock, except for the MSI. The MSI board here, apparently, for one reason or another, I got the Z790, but maybe I was thinking I would show it didn't matter. So while I'm waiting on this, let me just take a quick look in the chat room. Just when I think I'm ready to start the video, you know, stuff like this happens. I'm used to it now. At this point, you know, it used to surprise me and I'd be like, really, what are the odds? Now I know the odds are about 90% that I can check everything before I go live. And then as soon as I go live, there's an update. So now instead of upsetting me, I just laugh at it because of course that's going to happen. And that's the beauty of live video. Now, it is possible you can always solve the heating issues with a more expensive cooler. And when I say solve, I mean you can improve at the very least. If you have the time and the money and the skill, and you don't mind spending even more money on top of the money you already spent in order for the thing you bought that was advertised to work properly, requiring you to spend more money, hey, that's fine with me if that's fine with you. I personally find it unacceptable. I think what I want to do, because this should not be taking this long, I think what I want to do is go ahead and restart this computer because something doesn't seem right here. And then I think I even have the Samsung Magician software on that utilities flash drive, and we can load it a lot faster that way. And the firmware update should be lickety split. So we'll get underway here in just a second. But essentially, the free utilities I'm going to use, HW Info, is a free utility from, I believe, CPU Z releases that. We can use Cinebench R23, which you can download for free to check, you know, how hot the CPU is going to get under a resource-intense load. And then there's also, I'm missing one. At a very minimum, you need those two pieces of software. Whatever this firmware update didn't do, it seems to have caused the whole system to seize up. So I'm just going to manually shut it off and try this one more time. That failed firmware update seems to have affected the ability for the machine to shut down properly or even for the next update to install. It left something open-ended, is my guess, and now anything else won't work until we restart the machine. And since it didn't restart, I had to force it off. When things don't complete properly, this is kind of expected because we don't know when it didn't complete if it was able to shut everything else down or if it left other things open, and those other things that are left open may need to be closed in order to do something else like a restart or installing another software update. That's what they'll always tell you the first time you have a computer problem. Have you tried turning it off and on again? It's kind of turned into a joke, but it often solves the problem more often than not. So we always encourage our, well, at least in the businesses I've been in, encourage our customers to try turning the machine off and on again before calling for support, just to save time. I'm going to try this update one more time. I want to see what's going to happen. I might be a glutton for punishment if it repeats the same error. But I have to do it at least twice to figure out if that was a fluke or to figure out if something's wrong. So here it did successfully update. Now, when you update the firmware on a drive, you have to shut the computer off entirely and turn it back on. The computer is not all that smart. So when we turn the machine back on, it thinks we've just installed a brand new drive. It has no idea that that's the same drive. Therefore, we have to shut it off, turn it on, let the BIOS re-recognize what drive we have. It says, oh, you've replaced the drive. Now, Windows doesn't think that, but your BIOS does. And that's what part of a normal firmware update process on anything, even a mechanical drive, if on the rare occasion you'd ever see a firmware update on them. It changes the identifier. It'd be like, you know, having your face replaced, and then people don't recognize you anymore. You're still you, just with a new face. So firmware is basically putting a new face on the drive from the BIOS perspective. Doesn't recognize it anymore. Now, with regards to the new version of the Samsung Magician, I think I have that on my flash drive here. Let's take a quick look. It's something I install a lot of, so I would prefer to install it locally than download it every time. Pretty big piece of software, but I also think it's important, and one of the benefits of having a Samsung drive is this software that just isn't going to work with other drives. So it might cost a little bit more to buy the Samsung, but I think this utility is worth the extra price. Do I want to overwrite? Yes, I do. And then I don't have to wait for the download since I've already got it here. Okay, finally, getting that installed. This should not require a reboot. And then once we've got this installed, we can move forward with what I was trying to do 10 minutes ago, which is copy over the free software that's portable. In other words, we don't have to install it. So we can measure what's happening here to see if we're affected. And we will be affected across the board. I already know that. And then I'm going to show you how to identify and change that so we're not affected anymore. Now, whether or not you choose to do this, I'm not telling you you have to. I'm simply giving you information, and how you choose to use that information is entirely up to you. You may choose to just leave everything as is, and that's perfectly fine with me. On the other hand, if you're running into heat issues or you're concerned about the longevity of your CPU, but feel helpless about it, you're no longer helpless after watching this video. You'll know exactly what to do. So with that being said, let's start. Go to the yellow folder down here, and we'll go to my flash drive where I have these free utilities. And I'm looking under PC testing software, and what I want is Cinebench R23. There is a newer version, but we're going to use R23 because it's smaller. And then we're going to use hardware info, HWI, and I think this is the latest version, but that's okay. Even if it isn't, it'll be close. And with that, that's all I need off the flash drive. I can also see the system has updates it wants to install. It's downloading updates in the background. And even my Windows antivirus is complaining. Everything is upset because the machine has been off for a couple of weeks. And again, you simply can't do this with a modern day computer. With your cell phone, you're getting updates constantly. You're getting app updates. You're getting Android or iOS updates probably at least monthly. So when a machine is turned off, a desktop computer, especially as one that's a big target like Windows, the updates become even more critical. But we can let that update. I don't think that's going to affect us regardless. So let's just keep moving on here. When we bring up HWI, or hardware info, we bring up the 64-bit version, and we're going to just do the sensors only. Close that one. And what we can see here is our CPU core temperatures here and where we're idling at. This is our current temperature down this row. This is the minimum temperature since we just started the software. And then this is the maximum temperature that we've hit since we started the software, since we started running this particular piece of software. And this is directly going to be correlated with how many watts we're sending to the chip. Now, how many watts should this chip be getting? One way to figure that out is just look it up. So if we say We'll go to Google, maybe, if my keyboard will work. Let's go to Google. And let's type in, we want to know the what are called power level 1 and power level 2 settings on an Intel 13500. It says the PL1 and PL2 settings, I actually was able to see that without having to click on the link. I don't know if you've caught that as well. Right here, it's telling us without having to click that power level 1 is 65 watts. That's your low side. Won't go any lower than that. And power level 2 should be at 154 watts for this chip. I don't think it changes on the 14500, and I could very well have a 14500. Not sure which chip I've got. Yeah, that's a 13500. So I got it right. Okay, so we know 65 and 154. But if we come down here, we want to see how much wattage is being sent to the CPU. And we're going to see that same current wattage, minimum and maximum since we started the software, since we started measuring. Now, if we see if we can extend this out a little bit, get more information. One of the indicators you're going to be looking for is going to end in the letter W. We're not interested in volts and we're not interested in temps. What we're looking for is watts. And we're looking for that on the CPU. So right here, you'll see we're at 65 watts on the low side and 210 watts where it's supposed to be 154. So that's concerning because we're on a box cooler, right? And the box cooler should be at box cooler settings. In my opinion, I mean, that's the whole point of having the settings, and that's the way that the box cooler's been tested by the manufacturer to ensure that it's adequate for cooling the CPU so they don't get a bunch of warranty returns. That's going to affect their reputation, as well as cost them a lot of money and upset a lot of their customers. Now, we're just doing updates in the background. This is just more or less idling, right? I mean, it depends on the update that's taking place. And it looks like it's just downloading right now. So that shouldn't take up much in the way of resources to download. It's the installation process. So let's restart and let's go into our BIOS. Now you can do that one of two ways. Usually I just hit restart or restart the machine by turning it off and back on again, and then immediately start pressing the delete key on the keyboard in the upper right corner over and over. And most keyboards, the delete key is in the upper right. But wherever the delete key is on your keyboard, just press it over and over, and it should get you into the BIOS. And then we need to usually go to advanced settings. But if you look here, on an ASRock motherboard, on this B760 Pro ASRock motherboard, it wants to know our fan setting right here. And if we click on that, we can set performance, full speed, and this is just affecting the speed of the fan. This is not affecting the voltage being sent to the chip. Okay, so this can make the fan very loud, but also keep your chip a bit cooler when it's idling, because if it runs at a higher speed, it moves more air, and then our idle temperature will go down. You can see we've got our chip. It's not overclocked. We are running standard 13500. It's running at standard speed. Everything looks happy. And there doesn't seem to be anything we can do here. Like, I don't see anything about the voltage or the wattage going to the CPU, nor does it seem to indicate to us that anything is running outside of stock. So even if we go to advanced mode, let's go to load UEFI defaults. Let's start here. All right, let's just reset the BIOS back to manufacturer specifications to make sure that I'm not doing anything funny over here. And that this would be the normal way somebody would build a machine. So we've loaded the defaults, and now we'll save changes and exit. So for example, I think I had XMP on, that should be off by default. And all the voltage settings should be back to Intel stock recommended or wattage, PL1 and PL2 settings. So once again, I'm going to hit delete, 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 delete until we get back in the BIOS and we can visually see if anything's obvious to us that's changed. It did give us a summary there at the end, but when we look in here, we're going to have to go to advanced mode. And then we need to go to, I think, overclocking tweaker, which sounds a bit like an insult. What did you call me? And there's a number of different settings that are going to really confuse people. Like under CPU configuration, there's all of this information. Boot, performance mode, ring to core ratio, offset. How about B clock, aware adaptive voltage, min cache ratios, PLL frequencies, speed step technology, turbo boost. Holy cow. How many people that own computers can tell us what this stuff means, do you think? So the PL1, your power level 1, that's going to be your long duration power limit. In other words, that's the one you're going to use the most of. We can run 65 watts all day, no problem. Why would they just call it PL1? Well, ASRock seems to think that long duration power limit, and that is set correctly at 65 watts. You see the 65 right there. Our short duration power limit, that's our PL2. That's defaulting not at 153, or was it 154? It's defaulting at 219. You see that? And it says don't send any more than 279 to it, which is nearly twice the Intel recommended settings. And this is default out of the box. That's what it's set to. How insane is that? How offended are you? Because I'm offended. I'm saying this isn't right. There's absolutely no way that's right. Now, in some BIOSes, it'll ask you what kind of cooler you have. And if you have a box cooler, it sets the PL1 and PL2 lower, but still higher than recommended. And then if you have a third-party air cooler, tower cooler, or if you have a liquid cooler, and every time you select a different one, the voltages or the wattage goes up and up and up. Say, well, if you got a better cooler, we can send more wattage and kill it that much faster. So it's sort of like how much weight can you carry on your shoulders? Let's figure out what the limit is before you collapse, and then we'll just make you carry that. At some point, you're going to collapse sooner. Now, some BIOSes, if you look around, you might see where it asks you this information, and some BIOSes don't. So as you can see here, there doesn't seem to be any option that I can find in the ASRock BIOS here. Let's go back to the easy mode, which is F8. That takes us back to, F6. Normally, setting the type of fan you have would be found here on the main page. That's normal. They have information on this easy page, like setting up RAID configurations, which is so bizarre to me because that's such an advanced feature. Why is it on why is the advanced feature option on the easy page? I really don't understand what the engineers or the management are thinking. Then you think, well, maybe it's the fantastic tuning, but all that's going to do is analyze the fans you've plugged in, and you have the option of running them quietly, normally, high performance mode, or just turn them on full speed and get all the noise, but also get the maximum performance cooling out of them. And you're going to notice as we go from one manufacturer to another, their easy mode has completely different options, and some are clearer than others. This is, to me, a mess, a massive mess. I mean, we're already in the 40 degrees Celsius just idling, which is, to me, is crazy. Now, if we just leave everything alone, because I can't see anything else to change, right? Let's just get out of this. I don't know that we've changed anything, have we? We just set the BIOS defaults, right? I think that's what we did. Just to be sure, let's go over here. Let's load the BIOS defaults one more time. Yes, and then save changes and exit. And then we're going to run that same software, our hardware info, and then we're going to run Cinebench R23. We only need to run it for a few seconds. It's going to ramp up really quickly. And that's going to tell us that's acceptable and normal without asking us if that's okay. In fact, if we don't go looking, they're not going to transparently let us know. So you might think you have a problem with regards to your CPU running hot, that you didn't build something correctly or seat your cooler correctly, when in fact you did nothing wrong. And this is all because they're withholding information that they should not be. This information should be voluntarily offered. Now, if we go to hardware info, let's launch that again. And we'll take a look at what our minimum temperatures, our current temperatures on the left are minimums since we started this piece of software. In the middle, and then the highest it's peaked at since we started the HWI software here on the right. If we bring that down, look for the wattage. There's our PL1 and PL2. Keep an eye on those, okay? And also keep an eye on the temps. We'll keep both of those in here. We're going to go over here to Cinebench, and we're going to go ahead and start this. You ready? See what happens. Oopsie. Clicking the wrong things here. I hear that fan already cranking up. Where did my HW info go? It disappeared on me. I think it's in the system tray. Within seconds, you can see we have very quickly escalated our temps up to 89 degrees Celsius right now. Now you'll notice where I've got it highlighted on PL1 limit, it says static. That means that information is not going to change. It's not currently monitoring that. It's locked in. So we do know that when we hit these higher temps, that we are using more power to do that. Power equals heat. More heat, more power. If you're running this within the power specifications that Intel advises, you shouldn't have excessive heat-related issues, nor should your CPU prematurely die on you through being degraded rapidly through constant overvolting. Now, when we look, the longer we let this run, and this particular test will take 10 minutes to run, you're looking right now, just within the first 90 seconds, that we have hit 89 degrees Celsius. But what would happen differently if we set that high level, that PL2, what if we put that back to Intel's recommendation? So if we hit stop here, close this test out, then we'll instantly see our temps drop back down and it'll calm down. And again, this is only when the CPU is being pushed. If you're just idling, you're going to be on your PL1 setting, which should be set low. Let's go back in the BIOS and let's make that change real quick. Now, again, it's going to be called something different in every motherboard manufacturer. It's going to be located somewhere different from every motherboard manufacturer. And the chip you've got, you need to look up what the PL1 and PL2 settings are on your 12th or 13th or 14th gen Intel chip to identify what the settings are supposed to be, because they're not always the same. So we're going to go to advanced mode, and we're going to go to the overclocking tweaker under CPU configuration on the ASRock board. We're going to just look for that 65 again. I know it was down here somewhere. 65 right there. And we're going to change the short duration, or PL2. You just type on top of the word auto. You notice how the word auto is highlighted right now? We'll put in, what was it, 154, 153? I think it was 154. And then enter. So now we're telling it 65 is fine. In fact, we can change this as well. We'll make this 65 instead of auto. And then we lock that in. And then the core limit, once again, we need to change that to 154 too. We want to make sure that we're not finding an excuse to overvolt this chip or to send too much wattage to the chip just to get a teeny tiny little bit of performance, lose a ton of efficiency, and potentially make the chip's life shorter and maybe even crash the computer. So we're going to go ahead and save these settings and reboot, and we're going to repeat the same test and see if there's any difference. Do you think there's going to be any difference? Or do you think this is all just a feel-good thing? Like, let's go in there and change the numbers to what they're supposed to be according to the manufacturer of the chip, rather than disrespect them and throw whatever number we want. Do you think that might make a difference? Thank you to Josiah Guernsey. Renews membership, now a member for 20 months. Thank you to Colin Hunt with a 10-pound contribution. Right on. Thank you, Colin. Okay, let's do this again. Back over to HW Info 64, sensors only. When that pops up, there it is. And then scroll this down a little bit. We should be able to verify our PL1 and PL2 settings are what we set them to just now, is our minimums and our maximums. And then we'll go ahead and, after verifying that, we'll start Cinebench again. We can let it run for another 90 seconds and see if our results have changed at all. Let's find out. Watch live, unscripted here on YouTube as we go through this without any script or rehearsal or edits. What's it going to do? Now, our high temp in the last 90 seconds was 89 degrees Celsius. Right now, we're hitting 83. Now, I've seen people spend money for expensive cooling devices and compounds just to drop a CPU a few degrees Celsius. And we've been able to do that effectively as things change. We have already achieved that same level, if not better, of cooling without spending one penny. Now, some might argue you lost some performance. This is true, but we gained more efficiency. So the cost of energy, electricity, and the amount of work that power supply has to do has all been reduced. And over time, that's going to add up to not spending money, but saving it. So by spending more money to buy better coolers and better compounds and contact frames, you're also going to spend more money on the electricity to run it, since it won't be as efficient. You're going to need a better power supply to provide that power. This is just a 500-watt power supply I'm using here. So are we a minute and a half into this? Have we done 90 seconds yet? We're just about 90 seconds in. Yeah, so we hit our max temp pretty early on. That's a 6-degree difference just on this chip with this board running the same test, just by pushing a few buttons on the keyboard. Now, to me, this is how it should arrive out of the box. If I haven't made that clear enough, in my opinion, this is how this motherboard should default, unless I'm smart enough to go in there and change it. And in fact, I would even argue that it shouldn't even be changeable on a locked CPU on a B series chipset. On a Z series chipset, like what we have over here with the MSI, maybe I could give it a little bit of leeway in understanding. Maybe. Okay. So suddenly now, 83 is fine. 89, I was getting a little nervous about. I'm not nervous about 83. Let's go ahead and shut this down. Let me go back over here to camera 1. Let's move over to MSI and let's see how this process runs. They all do the same thing. I promise I am trying to get through this quickly, but this is a pretty detailed, like I don't want you to be left unclear. I want you to understand that regardless of the motherboard manufacturer, they're going to all impact you equally. You're not immune from it simply because you bought AMD or a different motherboard maker. In order to keep things moving, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to cover the AMD side just yet. That'll be a future video. These videos, as you can imagine, they're very expensive because in order to buy 4 processors, 4 motherboards, 4 sets of RAM, 4 SSDs, it's about $600 per board here in parts. So we've got a $2,400 investment just to make this video for you. That's the only reason I bought this stuff, was to make this video. What I do with it afterwards, I just try and recover my money. I won't make any money off of it, but I'm going to try and at least recover my investment. So we appreciate all the members here on the channel, as well as our friends over at Acronis and RoboForm and VIP CDK deals, who make it possible for us to even make this investment. Or all I can do is describe it to you. And describing it to you, I don't personally find it very helpful when I see other content creators, you know, saying, here's how you build a computer, and they go to a website and they just pick all the parts out. They don't actually build it or show you how that it all works or fits together, or it's all compatible, right? It's all theory and speculation. So I like to show real life, live, unscripted in real time, so you have a better idea of exactly what I'm doing, how long it takes, and what's involved without edits. Now, with the network plugged in, the HDMI keyboard and mouse, power supply, I've got my USB flash drive right there. I need the power switch, which I'll steal from over here. And then the power switch needs to go on this motherboard. Oh, right about here, I'd say. Okay. We flip this switch and turn this on. Oh. Nope. I'm just realizing I didn't plug a connector in over here. So let me do that real quick. I do these videos live, so you're going to see mistakes. You're going to see me rushing. And the more I rush, the more mistakes I make. And that's okay. I'm just anticipating I have to do this board and that board, trying to get through it quickly. And, you know, haste makes waste, right? So take a breath and bear with me here for a second as I finish what I started. Okay, that'll probably make a difference. All right. Won't have any voltage problems with that on. That'll solve it. All right, now we turn this on. CPU starting to spin. CPU cooling fan starting to spin. Let's switch back over to our HDMI input. And it doesn't matter if it's Windows 10 or Windows 11, this utility, Cinebench R23, HWI, we're going to run equally on those. And it looks like I've got a bunch of utilities on here already. Let's see, go full screen so I can see it the way you guys do. Okay, so I don't know what I've done here. Don't need that anymore. Okay, here's our HWI. Here's Cinebench. Oops. Move that over here, just so I have them pushed aside. Once again, because we've had it off, this wants to complain about something. I just want to make sure everything's happy. We look in the device manager, everything should look good in here. Yep, everything's fine. And the chip we've got, is this a 13500 or is this a 14500? This is a 14500. Now, I don't think the PL1 and PL2 settings are going to be different on a 14500 because it's effectively the same as a 13500. They just spit on it and then they went like this and they said, there, 14th gen. That's all Intel did. Not literally, but it's more or less the equivalent of what they did. It's no new technology here. Just polished what they already had. And then they gave it a different generational number, even though it's the same generation. It's very strange. It's all marketing. Don't know what to tell you. Now, if we type in PL1, PL2 on a 14500, which obviously only Intel makes, we can see it's the same. 65 watts on the low side. And of course, you should be getting the information directly from Intel's product specifications page, but it's the same. 65 watts on the low, 154 watts on the high side. Okay, let's go into the BIOS and see. We're going to reset back to defaults because, again, I was messing with these a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember what state I left them in. So in order to make sure that everything is being compared equally, you can verify with me that we are putting the BIOSes all in default. We're not making any assumptions. You don't have to trust me. And you'll see this BIOS looks very different from the ASRock BIOS. So you say, okay, well, that's definitely different. And I think it would probably be in my benefit, for your benefit, for me to turn camera 1 off so you can get a full picture of the BIOS here. And what I want to do is I want to load the BIOS defaults, first and foremost. So in order to do that, it's in here somewhere. This is apparently the easy mode, and this is the advanced mode. So normally, which one's which? They both look exactly the same to me. This Creator Genie, this is obviously going to overclock things, so we want that off, even though it's not even an option for us. Apparently you can turn your TPM, your Trusted Platform Module, on or off. So I guess if you want to put Windows 10 and not be bothered by Windows 11 saying, hey, you should install me, if you don't have the TPM enabled, then it'll say this is not a Windows 11 compatible computer. Therefore, it won't surprise you one day by installing Windows 11 because you won't be compatible until you turn this on. So because we have Windows 11 on it, this has to be on. Okay, so we're in easy mode. It says so right here. So we go to advanced, I think. Settings, maybe. Save and exit. Looking for the BIOS defaults. Restore defaults. Load optimized defaults, yes. And then save changes and reboot, yes. And when this comes back up, we'll start hardware info and we'll take a look at what the static PL1 and PL2 settings are. And we can run Cinebench R23. This would assume that you just built a computer with a overclockable motherboard, but not an overclockable chip. So one would reasonably assume that there's no way to overclock this chip. Do you think that's what's going to happen? So let's go over here to HW info. Let's go ahead and start this as we normally do. Sensors only. Then we'll scroll down, see our temperatures here. CPU cores. Pull that down so we can see what we're idling at. Look at that, we've already hit 54 maximum here already since we started the software. And then we'll scroll down and look for our PL1. Just look for the W's right over here. Wattage, and then PL1, 65 and 154. What? It set it to stock? Huh. On a Z series motherboard, it's doing exactly opposite. Wow. Holy cow. That is not what I was expecting to see. Wow. Wow. All right, hold on a second. Let me go back in the BIOS. I did save the default settings, didn't I? Because I'm thinking that's what I would have set it to manually. So I'm surprised. I'm a bit delighted. I was not expecting to see that. I tell you, these videos are live, unscripted, and unrehearsed. I mean, there's your proof right there. I am genuinely surprised in a very good way. So, couple of questions I have. We're in the advanced mode. So I'm going to go back into settings. Actually, I guess I need to go into overclock. And let's take a look if I've left something here off of auto. I mean, you can see the stuff gets pretty intense information in here, pretty technical. There's voltage. I'm looking for wattage, not voltage. And I'm not interested in playing around with the RAM. Really just about the CPU. Advanced CPU configuration, maybe. Oh, I didn't mean to change that. I don't know what I just did. What happened? Where did everything go? I think it just locked up on me. Everything was going so well. All right, I'm going to just go ahead and cut power to it, and we're going to turn it back on again. Let's turn this back on. Give me just a second. As you see the no signal, that means the system has been shut down. And then we're going to go right back into the BIOS. I don't know why that froze up, but I was pushing something. I thought I was somewhere else in the BIOS, and I might have caused that. So don't mind me. Again, live video, real life. All right, so we're in advanced mode. We go to the overclocking settings, and we'll scroll down to advanced CPU configuration. That's better. And I'm looking for anything that indicates 65 watts and 154. And it is set to auto, and it is doing it. It's doing it properly. This is how it's supposed to work. Who would have thought of all the boards and all the places, the MSI Pro Z790 Wi-Fi board designed for overclocking is not overclocking the unlocked, or the locked chip. This is the most bizarre thing I have ever seen. That is so strange to me. All right, so just out of curiosity, if we go back to easy mode, I mean, I like to turn the CPU fan fail warning on. Obviously, if you have a liquid cooler, that wouldn't really apply. But yeah, look at that. Nothing needs to be fixed here. That is running exactly the way it should. Now, just out of curiosity, if we go ahead and save this, bear with me for just 1 second. Let's go ahead and save. What is it, F10? So the only thing we're really changing there is the CPU fail warning. We'll go ahead and boot it into Windows 11, and we're going to run HW info along with Cinebench for about 90 seconds. Now, we achieved 83 degrees Celsius on the B760 ASRock board, but that was also a 13500, not a 14500. So there's a slight difference there, but it is the same architecture, just a little more refined on the 14th gen side of things. It's still 13th gen architecture, regardless of what Intel wants to name it. Okay, so we're going to go back over to hardware info. We're going to start this up. And we'll bring up Cinebench here. Okay, there's our PL1 and PL2 settings and our temps. Okay. Okay. Here we go. So about 90 seconds, about all it takes. We'll know what we need to know here. And we've already hit 86, so we've already exceeded what the ASRock board did, even with the same PL1 and PL2 settings. But again, it's a 14500 chip and not a 13500, so it makes sense it might run a little warmer. Not going to blame the motherboard manufacturer. And if you're wondering where I'm looking at the clock, I'm looking right up here. And it starts at 10 minutes. So when we're in 8 minutes and 30 seconds, we know we've run for about 90 seconds. That's close enough. I don't need it any more precise than that. And likely 86 is the peak of what we're going to see. And we've already hit it. I don't think, I mean, it's as the test runs, if we want to wait here 20 minutes, we might run hotter. But it's the first 30 seconds of this test that really push the CPU. If you want a general answer right now without waiting 20 minutes, that'll get us in the ballpark of what to expect. Okay, so about 5 more seconds left here. We can stop it. And it does look like 86 is going to be our peak. And that's fine. Again, my personal preference, if you're a regular viewer, you know I'm uncomfortable with anything over 85 when it's being stressed. At 86, we're close, but close enough for government work. That's not worth spending any time or money on to get 1 degree. Like 1 degree isn't going to make that big of a difference in the world, in my world, I should say, because my customers simply don't use their machines like that. It's a very unrealistic test we're running. Now we're going to go ahead and shut this back down, and we'll go full screen on camera 1. Because now I'm genuinely curious if the Z series boards are actually honoring the Intel wattage requirements. Is that due to MSI? Does that mean MSI is not doing what everybody else is doing? Or is it just particular to this MSI board? So I have a different MSI board, and it's already prepped. Now, I didn't know I was going to do this when I started. But again, it's a live video. Definitely want that power supply off before we're disconnecting things. We don't want to accidentally short circuit anything. Certainly not ourselves. And did I take the, yeah, I took the CPU and mouse out of there. Let's go ahead and take this one away. And I know this looks like it was planned, but I assure you, I am buried in parts over here. And I have motherboards prepped from different manufacturers, just because that's a normal day in the business. But this is, well, it's a Z792. I thought that was a 760. Do I have an MSI? Hold on a minute. Let me. Do I have a 760 MSI? Well, I guess I didn't prep for this test as well as I thought I did. But that's okay. That's okay. Will this board do the same thing? Will this board honor the wattage requirements from Intel like the other MSI Z board did? It's not the same board. This is the Tomahawk. Do you think it's the same? Or do you think even from the same manufacturer with the same chipset on a different board that it'll disrespect the wattage? What do you think? Tell me what's going to happen. Tell me what you think is going to happen. Are we going to see consistency from the manufacturer, or is it going to be completely inconsistent and based on each individual board? Because we're going to find that answer out right now. Even I don't know the answer to this. Now, I wasn't intending on testing 5 boards. I was only intending on testing 4. So getting this squeezed in within 2 hours is going to be a tough one, but I'm going to try. Just don't want to be incomplete or leave anybody wondering, leave anything undone and untested within reason that would affect or be beneficial to most people. Okay. Keyboard and mouse. HDMI. Network. And Where's my power switch? That should go right there. This is on. Turn this one on. Okay, fan is spinning. Back over to our HDMI input over here. Okay, now back over to full screen so I can see. It's full screen for me. I don't have the utilities loaded up, so apparently I haven't tested this yet. I think this was a machine we built yesterday, wasn't it? Or Monday? Yeah, yesterday was Monday, wasn't it? All right, let's load the 2 utilities off the flash drive. Again, they're free and portable. You can download them and see yours and compare your system if you're curious. And I need, under PC testing software, I have HWI 770 and Cinebench R23 that I need to drag out of here. This is just a plain, clean install of Windows 11 Professional, and in the device manager, everything should be happy. I haven't done anything else to it. See, it's not even activated. So that's neither here nor there, but it just tells you what the status is. All these systems being tested are equal in all ways, and we're not giving any bios to any manufacturer. We're doing everything what I believe is fair. And let's go back over here to HW Info 64. Yes. Sensors only. Start. Close that out. And let's scroll down to our CPU temperatures right there. Okay, our minimums. Our minimums are in the middle. Our current temperatures are on this far left. Our minimum temperatures are in the middle, and our maximum temperatures are on the right. And this is since we started the software. Obviously, it can't be monitoring while it's not running. Then we'll take a look at our wattage. So we'll come down here, look for our PL1 and PL2. And it looks like it is, in fact, honoring 65 and 154. But is that the default, or did I change it? So let's find out. We'll restart. We'll go into the BIOS, and we'll load the BIOS defaults and save and exit. We'll see what happens. So once again, I'm going to just start hitting the delete key over and over and over again. And I do believe that leaving myself up in the corner is a disadvantage to you, the viewer, by blocking part of the BIOS. So let me go ahead and turn off camera 1 so you can see the entire BIOS. And we can verify just a minute here. I made it full screen for you, but then didn't for me. So let me join you. Give me just a second so I can see what you're seeing. Now, in this case, we also have a 14500 CPU. And we want to load BIOS defaults, which is going to be under settings, save and exit, restore defaults. See how they all slightly rename the same exact thing? Save changes and reboot. CPU cooler tuning. Where is that? Now look at this. This is very interesting. Where did this come from? CPU cooler tuning. This tells us it's going to change our 65 watt power limit to 4,096 watts. Now you might think, holy cow, that's a massive difference. It's not literal. What this means is 65 watts is no longer the ceiling. The ceiling is as high as you can jump. You don't have to worry about bumping your head. The ceiling has been removed. So what that means is we're going to let the CPU take as much wattage as it can take. if that's 100 watts, if it's 300 watts, if it's 400 watts. If the CPU will take it, that's what we're going to give. It's actually not going to give 4,096. They picked a very high number that effectively says this might as well say no limit. So in other words, there is no, we're going to let the CPU decide the limit by sending it so much watts that it pushes us back and says that's too much. That's what 4096 means. It means no limit. All right, so where is that set? That's what I'd like to know. So we're going to reboot, but now it thinks we have a liquid cooler. So I'm going to press delete, 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 and we're going to go back into the BIOS one more time and figure out where the heck that setting was. So bear with me here for a second. I'm hitting delete over and over again. And let's see, is that maybe an easy mode? Let's go to easy mode. Doesn't seem like you'd think this would be right up where we could see it, but apparently not. It's very well disguised and hidden. So let's go to advanced. Let's go to overclock mode. And we're in expert mode. And right here, it says CPU cooler tuning. Isn't that interesting? So again, this is where MSI is different. And based on what kind of cooler we tell it, it's going to adjust our PL1 setting to 65 watts on a box cooler where it's supposed to be, 288 watts on a third-party tower air cooler, and no limit on a liquid cooler. Doesn't matter if it's a big liquid cooler or a little one. Apparently, liquid cooler racism and stereotyping is alive and well in MSI. Yeah, if it's a liquid cooler, they're all the same. That's crazy. So we have a boxed cooler. Now, does that actually mean it's honoring those numbers? I don't know. Let's go to advanced CPU configuration and let's look for 4096. Okay, so we haven't saved and exited yet. But if you're curious, what if, and again, I'm probably starting to confuse you because I'm starting to confuse myself. What if we don't save this? Let's just quit without saving. Let's leave everything to BIOS defaults. And if we leave everything to BIOS defaults, and you can see that that 4096 is now going to be our maximum. Let me bring camera one back up here for a minute so I can seize ya. What do you think is going to happen when we run Cinebench? We've not spent any money. All we did is we pushed some keys and moved the mouse. That's all we've done here. And in my opinion, shouldn't have needed to. You should be able to trust the manufacturer out of the box to give you a stable, reliable, and optimized default setting to the BIOS for maintaining not only performance, but heat and fan noise. If they only seem focused on performance and damn with the heat and the fan noise, who cares? That's your problem. I just really have a problem with that being the default, assuming that we all prioritize performance over longevity, reliability, or noise, or even efficiency. Like, that's crazy. They didn't ask me. They just assumed, and they didn't even tell me they assumed. I had to go looking. All right, so here we'll go back full screen for me. Once again, I don't get to see the screen the way you do. I really wish I could, but now that I'm full screen, we're going to bring up hardware info again. We're going to start that one more time. And we'll bring up Cinebench. And just to verify here, we'll scroll down. We can look at our current temps, our minimum temps, and our maximum. And a little bit further down, we can look at our PL1 and PL2 settings here. And we can verify that it is maxed out all the way across the board. Both PL1 and PL2 settings have been set to no limit. Again, 4096 means infinity. It means whatever the CPU can take is what we're going to give it. And every CPU is different. They can't set a number, a maximum number, because one CPU will be able to do that and one CPU won't. Even if both CPUs were made off of the same factory and the same process at the same time, We call that the silicon lottery. The silicon is not precise in that it comes out exactly the same. It would be like getting a slice of pizza, and one slice tastes better than the other slice, even though it's all part of the same pizza. When they make CPUs, they make the dies. The dies, they come off of one massive disk, forget what they call that, and it gets cut up into slices like a pizza. And so some of the slices perform better than others, even though they're made on the same substrate. Okay, so anyway, blah, 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 tech, geek, jargon, whatever, doesn't matter. Let's go over here now to Cinebench. Do you think I can run it for 90 seconds? What do you think is going to happen? Start that. There goes nothing. Guess I need to see everything. Holy cow. How long did that take? Where are we at? I just see red. It's angry. Woo, it's angry. That's the default settings out of the box. That's not the way the other MSI board was defaulting. Isn't that interesting? So same manufacturer, same Z series chipset. You know, I don't want to torture this. That's just cruel and unusual punishment. That's completely unjustifiable. Nobody, that CPU did nothing to deserve that sort of torture. And if you don't know any better, that means that you're doing this to your CPU and you have no idea. Oh, you mean I was supposed to water the plants? Or plants don't really have feelings, do they? You mean I was supposed to feed the dog? If you don't know, you could be causing harm unknowingly because you put your trust in the manufacturers when you bought the products. And based on the history of the products, we've never had to do this before. This is unprecedented. Across the board, they're all doing this. And how we have to adjust it, once again, we have to go back in the BIOS. So let's go back in the BIOS. Now, in the case of MSI, when we set it to boxed cooler, supposedly it's setting those power level 1 and power level 2 settings. But what if it doesn't? We can still manually go in and change those. So let's do that now. Let's just manually change it rather than trusting it. And let's do the same thing we did on the ASRock board, but you'll see to get there is a completely different route. And what they call it is different. What did ASRock call it? Long and short term instead of PL1 and PL2? How maddening is that we can't even agree on what we're going to call it, even though Intel does have an official name for it. There's no reason to not honor the name Intel has given it. Do you like my new son, Jacob? Oh, no, we don't like the name Jacob. We decided we're going to call your son Bruce. Wait, what? I didn't know that you were allowed to do that. Seems a little disrespectful. Why? We just feel like it. No good reason. Yeah, I'm not okay with that. So let's go back over here into the BIOS. We've got to be in expert mode. So if you see up here it says easy mode, that means we're in expert mode now, and you hit that to go to easy. When you're in easy mode, then the button will take you to advanced. I know it seems weird that you think it would tell you what mode it's in. And it does say right down here, this says easy mode, but when you go into advanced, it doesn't tell you that. I guess if you're in advanced mode, you should be smart enough to know, or you don't belong here. All right. I think that's a lie. I'm just guessing because they're not disclosing anything. Under advanced CPU configuration, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look for that wattage number. So long duration is your 65 watts. And your short duration is your big number, your 154. Excuse me. CPU current limit, that's a little scary. Long duration maintained, that's the amount of time it can do that. I think we can ignore everything else. So these numbers we plugged in, the 65 right over here, and the 154. Those don't take effect until we save the BIOS. That's why they're not reflected on this side. This side is where they're set the last time the BIOS was saved. And when we save the BIOS, the changes we make only take effect then. So nothing we're doing here just takes effect until we save. So it's verifying these are the changes you want to make. Yes. So it's going to apply the changes and restart with those new power settings. Okay, so we're going to start Cinebench one more time, and then we're going to move on next to the Gigabyte board and continue to see the variety of how each motherboard manufacturer handles this differently, and understand the madness of being a computer technician right now with the amount of calls that I'm getting with regards to why is it running hot, or have you seen the news about the Intel chips crashing? Yes, yes, yes. We've been talking about this for some time. Okay, we can verify our PL1 and PL2s are set as recommended by Intel, that we did by hand, that we shouldn't have had to do by hand, in my opinion. And we're going to run Cinebench again. Here we go. We'll start this out. And keep an eye on these temps. And I think I can bring back camera one again while we're waiting. Now we hit 100 degrees Celsius. We hit the maximum allowed. It's still warm. Look at that. It's already hit it again. So what that's telling me is there's another setting we're missing. Somewhere in there, there's a setting we're missing. So again, I hate the idea of torturing this. It really, really bothers me. And, you know, it's bothering me when it's only happening for 90 seconds. Now, as you can imagine, if you're doing this for hours and hours and hours while you're gaming day after day after day, this is going to cause the CPU to fail early. Now, we didn't hit 100, we're hitting 98, but still, well, actually, I do see 100 down there. Let me go ahead and stop the torture. This poor chip. You poor thing. And let's go ahead, go back in the BIOS. I'm just curious about something here. Let's restart. One more time. Delete, delete, delete. Kelly Stewart says, remember to put the cooler settings back to box cooler. That's exactly what I was about to do. And well, I was reading your chat. I was distracted and missed the opportunity to get in the BIOS. There's likely another setting that I just missed that setting it to box cooler will do for us. So there's like 2 different ways to get this done. I much prefer to have control over it than to trust that the motherboard manufacturer is going to do the right thing. Because even if they do, it doesn't mean after a BIOS update, they'll continue to honor it. I hate to put my trust into technology. That's one thing you're going to learn about me if you haven't already. Since I've been using computers in the 80s, they were untrustworthy then. You could not count on them to automate anything without breaking unexpectedly at an unexpected time. Maybe they worked for a little bit and then they stopped because something crashed or something failed, and you just assumed without checking on it that it was running fine. So regular auditing of automated processes, even today, is as important as it's always been, in my opinion. Now, let me turn off camera 1 so we can see the full BIOS again. Okay, so back under, let's see, we're in advanced mode, right? Because it says easy mode up here. So that means we're in advanced mode. I'm sorry, I think that's hilarious. And we'll go to settings and no, I'm sorry. We want to go to overclock. Even though we're not overclocking, we're trying to not overclock. We have to specifically tell it that. And under CPU cooler tuning, let's go ahead and pick boxed cooler. But the problem is now that we've picked boxed cooler, it might have changed the PL2 setting as well. So I want to make sure that 65 and 154 are still being set properly, and they are. And let's hit F10. And yes, that's the change I want to make. And we'll hit yes. I'm not sure if one's overriding the other. It did look like it said 65 and 154 during the HWI information screen, but there could be a maximum that's in. We saw that in the previous BIOS, that there was another maximum setting that was slightly higher. And rather than dig around for that right now, which I'm trying to get through 2 other boards here in the next 20 minutes. Just know that it might be in there, or you could theoretically do this if your board offers this as an option. So once more, we'll go back to hardware info, bring that up. Yes. Start. Cinebench. Again. Temps and our PL1, PL2 settings, just to verify they haven't. Yep, they're set correctly. So here we go. Start this. And we're going to watch this row right down here. We want to see our maximums. And we'll see if we can get 90 seconds out of this thing without exceeding 90 degrees. We've already hit 88. And I think 88 is going to be our maximum. So we know this within the first 20 seconds. What a difference. All I did was move the mouse and push some keys. I changed no hardware. I spent no money. See what I'm getting at? I'm a terrible salesman, aren't I? I should be here telling you, you should buy this thermal compound, you should buy this contact frame, you should buy this $400 liquid cooler, you should take everything back apart and risk breaking it over something simple because the screwdriver slipped or you dropped something. And then suddenly you're into it for a few $100s and then hours and hours of your day, just so you want it to run the way it was supposed to run out of the box without you screwing it up. They're screwing it up for you. So there you go. So again, that's another Z790 board from MSI, and it looks like they do a pretty good job if you know what to look for. And we're just about at 8 minutes and 30 seconds. So we're almost at our 90-second test time. And I do believe we are seeing our maximum within the first 20 seconds of running the test. So 90 seconds may be a bit. But yeah, there you go. There's your evidence right there, right in front of you, live, unedited. Let's stop, close, and shut down. Now let's move to Gigabyte. Let's do the same thing. Is this exciting? It's crazy. All right. Let me go back over to camera 1 and go full screen. I can unplug my power cable and switch my power supply off. If I can do everything in the right order this time. And I think I'm going to need to switch positions. The cables aren't going to reach. So I will need to move this motherboard. Just trade places with that over here. Actually, we'll move the Asus board. We'll save that one for last. And we'll slide that one over afterwards. Look at me thinking ahead. HDMI. Network. Keyboard and mouse. Now this one says it's a 13500, but again, same chip, same family. And where's my CPU power here? It's got to go on right there. And I have to step around to do the rest. Probably would help if I wore my glasses when I did this, to be honest. The little details and the darkness does make it a little hard to see, but it's good practice for when I go blind entirely, but I can still work by feel. Challenge myself. And then, yeah, this one I definitely have to wear the glasses for. We have a lot of pins here. I do believe it should be these 2 pins here. We'll turn this back on. I think that's everything. Turn that back on. And let's go back to HDMI. Okay, so this is a Gigabyte B760M. And I've done some testing on this board, as you can tell from the, whoops, wrong one. From the desktop icon showing things like crystal disk mark results and such. This board was a returned board to Amazon, so I wasn't quite sure if it was going to work. So I thoroughly tested it within my 30-day return period in case I needed to return it. So let's go into the BIOS and let's make sure it's set to default settings. Let's do that first. We're going to run a little bit long because it says I'm 13 minutes away from hitting a 2-hour mark. And I have to get through this board and the next one. I promise you I will do it as quickly as I can without skipping any steps. I want to be thorough, but I want to be quick. And those two things are like saying I want to be short and I want to be tall. So I'm going to try my best to find the balance point. Let's get into the BIOS and let's go to, oh look, we've got an easy mode and an advanced mode. It's much easier to know here which one we're in. Look how different this is. Yeah, there's our 13500. Oh, I suppose I should get rid of camera. Okay, now you can see the whole screen. What do we have? Platform management, boot mode, Q flash, smart fan. So none of this is asking us if we have a liquid cooler or what kind of cooler, right? We don't see any of that. Let's go to load the defaults, just F7 here. Load the optimized defaults, yes. This would be the manufacturer's defaults, which one would assume were the safe and optimized set. And let's see what ends up happening. Your guess is as good as mine as we make sure the BIOS is set back to manufacturer's default settings. We'll start HW info and see what our PL1 and PL2 are. By trusting the motherboard manufacturer, we'll set those to a safe. Trusting the motherboard manufacturer. Sorry, I'm using myself. All right. That all in orange. I have no idea why that's different, but okay. PL1 and PL2, where are we at? Oh, that's not good. That is not good at all. Oh my goodness. What do you think's going to happen with these power level settings? That's the default. So PL1 is 200 more watts than it's supposed to be. And PL2 is infinity. We already know this is going to overheat in seconds. We already know that. I mean, this is insanity. Shouldn't do this. Really shouldn't do this. I am so sorry, CPU. Please forgive me. Oh boy. Here we go. Oh, it's not taking. Oh, it's already there. What was that? 4 seconds? Stop, 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 stop. The fire's burning. It's burning. Put out the fire. Put out the fire. Okay, okay, okay. Relax. Everything's going to be okay. Relax, relax. Okay. That's the default settings if you're building your own computer on a socket 1700 Intel chip. That is just wrong. Gee, I wonder why these Intel chips are crashing after 2 to 3 months. Must be something completely unrelated to this. Let's get into the BIOS and let's find out what we can change to make this thing safe. Okay. Once again, let me get rid of camera 1 here so we can see the whole screen. And as you can see, every manufacturer does a BIOS differently, even the way they call certain things, what they refer to it as. Let's go to advanced mode. Let me use the right mouse. That would probably. Okay. Advanced CPU settings, probably where we want to be. And I'm just going to look for something that says watts. I'm not even paying attention over here. Forget this side. Just show me watts. Seeing anything that says watts. So they buried it somewhere else. Turbo power limits. I think that's it. Enabled. There we go. Now we can see the watts. Power limit 1 is, I can't even type it in. I got to scroll down. Are you kidding me? What a stupid way to do this. All right, 65. Power limit 2. Oh boy, we're going to be here a while. Just hold the down arrow, I suppose. 154. What else we got down here? Anything else I need to see? Platform power limit. Is the platform the motherboard or the chip? At least they call it power limit. It still doesn't say PL. What is the platform? Does that include the RAM or is that? I don't know what the platform is. That's the package power. I'm going to say the platform power should probably also be 65. I really don't know. This is something I'd have to play with. It's different from MSI and it's different from ASRock. Power limit 2, we'll put it 154. And then DRAM we'll leave alone. Anything else we should be able to leave alone, I think. And then we'll come up here to save and exit. Save and. What is it? Okay. Save and reset. Yes. We're going to reboot again. And we're going to run HWI and, of course, Cinebench and see what ends up happening here. Now, we'll go full screen for me, and you guys already can see it full screen. HW info, and let's see where we're at here before we do anything else. $65 and 154, that looks good. And let's try this Cinebench one more time. Start. What's that? We've already hit 100 degrees Celsius. So it's not honoring it. There's something we're missing. It is not honoring. We are putting too much voltage to it. So that's fine. Thank you, Gigabyte. This is why you cannot trust the manufacturers. I think it's a big mistake to trust them. We're missing something. Let's close it back down. Let's take another look back into the BIOS. Again, we'll go. Now, this idea that you pick between air cooler and liquid cooler, I believe that's only something MSI and ASRock offer. I don't think Gigabyte or Asus offer that option, or if they do, I haven't found it. And apparently I didn't hit delete on time, so let me restart one more time. Try and get into the BIOS here. Don't assume that the settings between one motherboard manufacturer and another one will be the same or even be offered at all. That's why I'm showing all the different board manufacturers, is to expressly demonstrate that some board manufacturers offer things others don't, and they often don't use the same name when they do. So it can be very difficult to identify. Now, if we look within the tweaker settings up here, we're in advanced mode and under tweaker settings, and let's get rid of camera one more time. We're missing something somewhere that's obviously sending more wattage to the CPU somewhere else besides the PL1 and PL2. So let me take a quick look under advanced CPU settings. Now, if there is a place to tell it what kind of cooler you've got, I mean, clearly you should be looking for that, but don't assume it's going to be in there. It's not required, and it may be something that is limited to certain manufacturers or certain models of boards only. Just so we're clear. So the turbo power limits are enabled, but yet not being enforced for some reason. Something is overriding that. This could be the problem, right? You notice I'm not playing around with any voltages. I'm strictly looking at the wattage, and that's going to automatically fix the voltage for us. We don't need to do both. We just do one or the other, in my opinion. We don't want to disable the E-cores. They're not a problem for heat. Select MCU. Don't know what Rev 0, I don't know what that even means. Performance CPU clock ratio, efficiency. I would just think what we're looking for would be under an advanced CPU setting. I think that's the one thing they haven't. Sometimes you can tell the BIOS not to exceed a certain temperature, to throttle at a certain temp. And you might find that option, and you can choose that as well. Rather than changing your wattages, you can just let it throttle constantly by setting a lower temperature throttle point. But I wouldn't want to do that. Even if I could, I would. That's me personally. It's something you can decide. Not seeing anything different. Okay. CPU settings. What am I missing? Turbo should be fine as long as it stays within the power limits. I don't see any other options. I'm missing something. I know it's in here. And this is the frustration, is that the manufacturers can't agree where they're going to put it and what they're going to call it. Zaylan says under tweaker, find a CPU upgrade, set it to default. There's nothing that says CPU upgrade anywhere in tweaker. So I don't know where you're getting your information, but there's Life and there's Google. Please know Unless you're telling me from experience what to do, you're making an assumption based on virtual information. And you can see right in front of me, unless I'm not seeing it, you're going to have to be very specific with, if you're looking at something that I am not seeing, please tell me where it is. A lot of people have suggestions on what to change, and this is the problem. This is where we get all the misinformation and conjecture. Is these people are likely just going into Google and doing a search and believing what they read to be true, regardless of the source of the information, or sometimes despite the age of the information, not paying attention if they're reading information that's old. The information might be accurate, it might not be accurate, but be very cautious over the source of the information before you go and offer it to anybody else without any personal experience that you've done yourself. You're not helping, you're hindering. It's the very opposite of helping. So while your idea is, I'll just use Google and help him, you're likely just getting in the way. So what I'm trying to say is you always want to find at least a reputable source, meaning coming from Intel or coming directly from Gigabyte, or from a source that you're familiar with, before you parrot that out to somebody else. Unless you have personal experience, I will ask you, under those conditions, only make any recommendations, because it's just adding a lot of noise and confusion to what is already, when clarified, still a pretty muddy, confusing thing. Now, that being said, let's take a look at what's being said in the chat room here. No two people can agree on what I should change. So we're going back to Herm says, where it says enable on turbo power limits, change that to Intel. Where it says enable on turbo power limits. Let's see. Turbo power limits. Where was that? It says enabled, so I'm not quite sure. Oh, change it to Intel, he said? Oh, Intel POR. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Let's try that and see what happens. We won't make any other changes, just to see. I appreciate that suggestion. Maybe. Maybe it'll be helpful, or maybe it'll make no difference. We didn't see that. I never noticed that option on either the ASRock or the MSI boards that we've tested so far. So Gigabyte is introducing some other terminology here. Is that the setting we want? If you change too many things at once and you test it, then how can you be sure which setting it was that did it? So just one thing at a time. This is very time consuming. My thought was, let me show you, and then you won't have to guess, or you'll know exactly what to look for. But in no way would I ever guess Intel POR. I don't even know what that is. I am guessing the P stands for power. Anyway, I'm sure nothing that a definition Google search wouldn't easily answer, but I don't much care so much as I care if it fixes it. And if it does, well, we can move on to the next board. So let me go full screen over here, and let's go to HW. Start that out, and then we'll go to Cinebench. Let's close. Where is it? Close that. Start this and bring up our hardware info monitoring page. See if we have any better luck this time, huh? So again, usually within the first 20 seconds, we're going to know, no, we've already hit 100 degrees Celsius. So once again, this is the problem. People think they're helping and they're not. They're just confusing things. So I think I'm going to ignore the chat room and continue on my own. I understand the intent is to be helpful, but you're just guessing. And if I wanted to guess, I wouldn't make a video out of it. So we know that this chip is supposed to run below 90 when it's being properly operated, because we've demonstrated that from the other motherboard maker. So somewhere in the BIOS, there's a setting we need to change. And let me go ahead and take another look in here one more. Back into the BIOS we go, and I just need to kind of slow down a minute and read a little more carefully. One of the things when you start making changes is you need to put things back the way they were. So we're going to load the optimized defaults again. That's going to reset everything back. And then I'm going to go back over to the tweaker, and I want to try and find under, again, it should be, I would think, under advanced CPU set, not voltage. CPU settings is where this is where I'm expecting it to be, is somewhere in here. Something I'm missing. CPU thermal monitor. What if we turn that on? What does that do? Does it offer us to set a temp? No idea. That did not do what I wanted to do. Shouldn't be anything in AVX. That should be fine. Turbo ratio should be fine. It really should be right here. But for some reason, these aren't being honored, and I don't know if it's maybe the core current limit on amps. I just don't know what that number is supposed to be. Normally, I don't have to set that on other motherboard manufacturers' BIOSes, but that could be. Yeah, that should be left alone. We shouldn't have to be in here. Turn that back to auto. Power limit 2 is 54. This is an insane way to set. I've got to say, Gigabyte's got to be one of the worst so far. I think you'll agree. This is the most obscure, opaque, confusing. Right now, I've forgotten. What was the PLT? Hold on a second. I have gotten myself all confused. Was it 253 or 153? PL1 and PL2 for 13500. I've already forgotten. 153, right? $154. Okay. Okay, that explains that. 150. Maybe I should have saved Gigabyte for last if I would have known it was going to be this convoluted. So the time limit, I'm not worried about the time. It can be at 154 at whatever the default time limit is. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about it sending too many watts to the chip at all. And the DRAM shouldn't matter, but the core current limit amps. Let's see if I can Google that. Core current limit amps 13500. It's not really clear from my quick searches here during the live video what the answer to that question is. So that's okay. We're going to keep moving. Just move. Got to keep moving. Let's go back out of curiosity. Let me go back to easy mode real quick. Let's make sure there's something I'm not overlooking. Preferred operating mode. What does that even mean? Oh, I see. If we're going to be in advanced or easy mode by default. Platform power management. What does this mean? We turn that on. What does that do? What did that do? It's just on or off. Platform power management. Spec enhance. How about if we turn that off? Can we? Why is that not turning off? Turbo power. Please select Gigabyte performance drive to spec enhance if you find there's a need to change options in the value above. Okay. So when you turn one on, the other goes off. Interesting. When you turn spec enhance on, turbo goes off. Turbo on, spec enhance goes off. Definitely, I don't know what the deal is with disabling E-cores. I guess it's for improved gaming performance, but for everybody else, you definitely want those E-cores turned on. Ah, I don't know which one's worse. Spec enhance, does that sound worse than max turbo? How do we define these? Exactly sure. I wasn't expecting this to be this kind. I mean, I knew it was going to be a little bit challenging, but I really, honestly, would not have even entertained this concept if I would have thought this was going to get this involved. Okay, these are the changes. We'll save and exit, and we'll just try one more time. I might have to just revisit this on another date because we're already 15 minutes over our time, and I haven't even gotten to our Asus board yet. Okay, here we go. Paul says I set PL1 to 53, it should be 65. Well, having a number too low is not the problem. If I'm leaving some performance on the table, I'm okay with that. What I don't want to see is the overheating that we're seeing. So let me go back to HWI. Let's bring that up real quick. And yes, I would correct that. That's obviously a mistake I made, but I'm not worried about a mistake in that direction. It's a mistake in the other direction, numbers that are too big. In order to achieve what we're out after, let's not get caught up in the details. We want to look at the results. Now, we'll go back and go to Cinebench again. I don't know. I'm not convinced or hopeful that this is actually going to make a difference, but I need to test it to be sure. So let's see what happens here. Yeah, we're going to hit 100. It's just not going to cut it. We're missing something somewhere. And Gigabyte has not made this easy. And as a result, I will not be able to give you that information in this video. We can revisit it because we do need to move on. This is a live video and we have one more board to get through, which I would like to do before we officially end the video here. So I'm doing my best to keep this at 2 hours, but now it looks like we might be hitting 3 if we continue in this vein, which I'm hoping the Asus board will be a lot smoother than whatever this mess is. If you're wondering why you don't see me use Gigabyte boards anymore, I can't put my finger on exactly when Gigabyte started being really anti-consumer, but in my opinion, they've become a different company than they were, and I just won't put my name behind it and support it for my customers, because it's a poor reflection on me. If they're having problems, like for example, this heating problem that I'm struggling to resolve, and it appears that I don't know what I'm doing, because on that board, I don't know what I'm doing. But clearly on these other boards, I do. So is that on me or is that on the boards? When they're all the same configuration, I personally think you shouldn't need to be, have intimate knowledge of a manufacturer's processes when you're putting all the same components and ultimately end up with a computer that runs exactly the same for this, maybe the same amount of money. Or like, to me, this is just bad business on behalf of Gigabyte. And if they want to run their business that way, who am I to say not to? But I don't want to run my business based on how they run theirs. I'm not willing to tell Gigabyte to tell me how to run my business. I'll go to somebody else. And in this case, somebody else is literally anyone else, because as you'll witness, nobody, as bad, as convoluted as it is, nobody is that bad. So Gigabyte sets the standard on how bad it can get. Nobody's worse than that. I guarantee you, as much as I'm not a fan of Asus right now, their system is not anywhere near as bad as that Gigabyte system in lack of clarity. The fact that it's already obscure, it's already hidden, that's bad enough. So I'm a little angry and I'm a little frustrated that I've wasted all this time on a product that shouldn't demand it unless there's some advantage to go through all that. What am I gaining? Am I saving money? I'm certainly not saving time. Am I gaining better customer service, better reliability, better warranty? None of that's changing. So everything else being equal, we've already seen that the MSI and ASRock boards are pretty easy to change, and we verified it. And this is why you cannot believe what the board's telling you in the BIOS. Follow the limits. Okay, enabled. And then it doesn't. So it's not enough to say just turn the limits on, because now you're assuming that they're going to actually do that. And when you test it, you might find they're not doing it at all. So until you test it, don't believe it. This is why personal experience is becoming more and more valuable than just reading what people say online and living virtually as a spectator versus actually doing it yourself and being able to say with confidence and through experience what actually works and what doesn't. And this is going to become very, very valuable as we move more and more towards AI and false information and people just believing what they're told. Now, if you want to believe what you're told, don't let me get in your way. But I can't afford to. I will go out of business. So I have to make sure that things are running as they're supposed to, because if they don't, I get the phone calls. And it's bad on my reputation. It's bad for my customers. Plug that in, did I? It's bad for me because warranty work means I'm working for free. Customers are inconvenienced. Other customers waiting have to wait longer, or I have to hire employees and that costs me more money. Anyway, my tolerance for it is like this, because I got work to do. And this wasn't part of the work I ever agreed to do or to take on. Now let's take a quick look over here. We'll go back to, can we get in the BIOS? I waited too long. Let's restart this. Once again, while we're in here, we'll just double check what CPU. Back over to system. What do we have in here? This is a 14500. And again, we'll look in the device manager. We'll make sure everything's happy. Everything's happy. We'll go into the BIOS. So we'll hit restart, and screen goes black here. We'll start to rapidly pressing delete. Should get us in there. Okay. So we're in easy mode. It clearly says we're in easy mode up here. And there's our CPU. Fan control, boot menu, system tuning is probably based on the fans, I'm going to guess, but not what we're looking for. So we probably need to go into some advanced mode somewhere. Easy mode, English, search, aura, resize bar. Advanced mode. Okay, I guess we got to go over here. And then probably to AI tweaker. Well, I suppose the first thing we need to do is load BIOS defaults. Let's load the defaults. Let's save changes and reset. And let's see what our PL1 and PL2 settings are on a reboot here as we wait for the system to get us back into Windows. And we'll see what Asus is defaulting. Oh, I don't have the utilities, so let me grab my flash drive and we'll copy the utilities over. HWI, Cinebench R23. Okay, so out of the box, it's setting our PL1 at, well, much higher than it should be. I can't see it from that distance. 195 on the low side, but PL2 at 253 instead of 153. So just stock out of the box like that, what's it gonna do? When we run Cinebench. Probably not going to be pretty. Let's find out. Here we go. And we've hit it. That's it. I don't want to go any further. Okay. Close and close. Shut down and restart into the BIOS. Okay. Get rid of camera 1 so we can see the whole BIOS and nothing but the BIOS. And let's go to advanced mode here. So down here, advanced mode. Under AI tweaker. Internal CPU power management. Current long duration package power. That's supposed to be 153 on this chip. I guess we just type 153. Where's our short duration? Short duration is also set to auto. Set that to 65. CPU. See, the problem is they're not giving us any numbers here that we have to base anything off of. Allows configuration of a current limit for frequency power throttling. Can be set to a maximum value of 511.75 to prevent throttling when overclocking. Yikes! That sounds scary. Why would I want to prevent throttling? Because I want my CPU to burn up? Throttling is your protection from complete meltdown. And let me go back and see if there's anything else I need to change. I think that looks pretty good. Actually, let's go ahead and just leave that. Again, if we change too many things, I got it backwards. I need the long duration to be the small number. I just realized that. Let's go back over to AI Tweaker again. So the long duration is the small number, and the short duration is the big number. And then below, it's showing us what it's currently set at until we save the BIOS. So my apologies. Luckily, I caught that here. Saved it. So PL2 is the second setting. That's the short duration. That means temporarily. We're gonna go up to 153 watts temporarily as a maximum. But our long-term normal power consumption at 65. Just so hopefully you understand the logic behind. It would be so much easier if they simply called it PL1 and PL2. And even then you'd have to know that PL stands for power limit and the difference between 1 and 2. So I guess no matter how you look at it, it's a little confusing, but I wish they'd all agree, right? Because when you learn a system from, say, ASRock or a particular manufacturer, that knowledge may not be beneficial to you if you switch to a different manufacturer, or you're a computer tech and you're supporting every manufacturer that rolls in the door that your customers need help with. You can imagine how complex your job could suddenly become. Let's see if that made any difference. We'll try it one more time here as we're approaching 3:30 here in Phoenix. Puts me a half an hour over my normal show time. Start this up and we'll bring up Cinebench. PL1 and PL2 are now set the way they're supposed to be because we manually set it. Let's see what happens. We've already hit 91, 96. See, it's not honoring the numbers we set. Something is wrong. We're missing something again. This is frustrating. And this is a problem when you're watching a YouTube content creator who says, here's how you fix this, but then they don't demonstrate it because they themselves believe what they're telling you. In most cases, I truly believe that they think it's going to work, but then if they don't live demonstrate, or doesn't matter if it's live, if they don't demonstrate what they're suggesting, I would be very skeptical as a viewer because of what I'm experiencing myself. It isn't lining up with what content creators are saying, nor is it necessarily lining up with what people in the chat room are saying or people online when Google searches are saying. Every once in a while, you'll run into somebody who knows what they're talking about, but you've got to deal with a lot of people who don't. And regardless how much you trust a content creator, if they're not live demonstrating it, if they're saying just change this and change that and you'll be fine, don't believe it. I mean, until you actually try it. And if I were you, if you find, including myself, that a content creator needs correction, that you followed the steps and they made a mistake, let them know that in your experience, you found these are the settings that made the difference with your CPU and your make and model of motherboard. That would be very helpful. Not to be critical of somebody and not to insult them, but just say, I just want to share my experience. These are the settings I changed. This is the make and model and CPU that I have, make and model of motherboard. And then I'm sure the content creator and the other viewers would appreciate that without any hostility. Now, if we go back over here and go back to advanced mode, there's something here we're missing that's clearly having an impact. And it's likely, well, let's see, under CPU configuration. Just kind of curious if it might be spread across two different areas. Hmm. Quite sure what that does. But these are all the BIOS defaults here, just as a reminder. I do believe that we want to be under the AI tweaker. I think the settings we want are in here somewhere. I'm just missing it. This Asus performance enhancement. This is interesting. Limit CPU temp to 90 degrees Celsius. Now this might fix the overheating problem, but we might be constantly throttling, constantly. So I'm not sure this is the fix I'm looking for. I'd rather not have the CPU get to 90 to begin with versus limiting it to 90. And this is what I was referring to earlier when I said some BIOSes enable you to set that to whatever you want it to be. That does get you to the same end result, but with different performance results, right? To get you to the same temperature result, perhaps. What the heck is Tweaker's Paradise? Boy, they really do have a way with words, don't they? Now, you could drop your voltage on your VRMs down, but you have to do that little by little and keep testing. It's a very long process, so that's why I don't do it. I'd much rather just bring my PL1 and PL2 back to factory spec, and you shouldn't have to mess with any of this. It should just work reliably, as I've already demonstrated from the other motherboard manufacturers. Top here. I wonder if it's the GPU that's giving me grief. What if the CPU core PL1 and PL2 are not affected by the GPU? CPU graphics current limit. Set a high current limit to prevent frequency or power throttling. Hmm. CPU core cache current limit max. I'm looking here on the chat room. Don't let the CPU core cache on auto is my advice. Give it a set value according to Intel spec. I think more people are guessing because you're very vague with what the spec should be. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure what these numbers are supposed to be. And then down here where there's an explanation, you'd think they'd give us a ratio or a range of numbers we could pick from, but there's no point of reference for us. So I don't know what numbers are allowed in there and what they represent. That would require some Google searching. AI overclock tuner. Well, that's for the RAM. Why are we in the RAM? This is all RAM. Hmm. Well, you can see it's even got me a little stymied here. This quickly makes my business unprofitable if I have to solve this differently for every customer. If there's not one fix, if it's this fix for this brand of board and that fix for that brand of board, and then depending on which CPU you have and depending on which BIOS version you have, this is quickly going to be money loss for me. Saying keep Intel default. Keep to Intel default. Maybe that's what we need to do. Disable that one right there. Just turn it off. Let's see if that's all I needed. Oops, don't want to save it. One change, that's all I'm making. Let's see if it makes any difference. Okay, and let's see what happens. Okay. One more time. It's getting hot. Fan is cranking up. Oh, this is different. These are the numbers I was looking for. I think we found it. That's what we were looking for right there. See if any content creators are telling you to do that. So here's my point. There's so many different BIOS versions. There's so many different models from so many different manufacturers that there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to this other than to educate you on what we're looking for and how we're testing it, and not to believe anything that you haven't tested yourself or seen, witnessed from a trusted content creator. Because, I mean, we're hitting, let's see, a maximum of 89, which is what we've seen from the other board manufacturers, except Gigabyte. That's the one that still remains an enigma. That's the one I can't explain. I will be able to, given enough time, but not, it shouldn't take this much time to figure out, right? I've been relatively, I believe, taking about the same amount of time for every board to figure this out on average, except for Gigabyte. They're on a whole nother planet. There is a solution in there. It's just very well hidden or phrased in a way that's not obvious to me. It might be obvious to somebody else. So we've already run for 90 seconds on this, so I don't need to continue that any further. That is our solution for the Asus Prime B760 Plus board. Okay, so I think with that, unless anybody has any questions, which, you know, apart from showing you what I have learned, what we've learned together, I'm not quite sure I'll have any further information in this regard, but somebody else in the chat room might. So if so, please go ahead and ask now. And while we're waiting for you guys to respond, I will quickly check my phone to see if I've missed anything here. And a shout out to Peter VZ with a €1 contribution twice now. Again, thank you to Josiah Guernsey, who renews membership now for 20 months. A thank you again to Colin Hunt with the £10 Super Chat contribution, and Jason H88, who renewed membership, now a member for 23 months, which is so awesome. I appreciate you guys so much. With your contributions, with your memberships, we're able to buy all this. Nothing was provided by any manufacturer Everything you're seeing, every CPU, RAM, storage, flash drive, power supply, all of this has been purchased using the funds from the channel to put back into the channel, just for the purpose of being able to make this video. So again, we've got $600 on average per board. So we've got $2,400 plus the other board. We're at $3,000 in parts just so I can make this video for you. I don't actually need these parts for anything. I'll figure out, I'll put them into a case and a power supply and sell them off. But the point is that this wasn't like I had the parts laying around anyway. This was very much intended and purchased for the creation of this video. And I will have to come back and do an update on the Gigabyte board anyway. So we're not done yet. Let's see. NetFreak sends an Amazon gift card for $10. Right on. Thank you to NetFreak. Our friend Gary Tatum with a $25 Amazon gift card said he's got a Z690 with a 12900K and it's set for 4096. I've always wondered why I couldn't get Prime 95 to run. I think he means to not run without overheating. There you go, Gary. So yes, the 12th gen are also affected. Mark Gaines, our good friend Mark Gaines, with a $100 Amazon gift card. Very generous, Mark. And Mark joins us from Northern Ireland. Thank you so much for that. And NetFreak had also contributed $1. Our friend Frankie B with a very generous Amazon gift card. That is awesome. Frankie, such a great guy. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to our friends Buster and Oystein, who've always been very generous here. And between Frankie B, Oystein, and Buster, their contributions almost entirely by themselves paid for all of this content. So if you guys see them in the chat room, please let them know how much you appreciate them and their generosity towards the community so we can do this. All of your super chat contributions of any amount are all appreciated because quite frankly, it all adds up. But these folks have given so much. It's like, holy cow. And again, and that's not to suggest anybody giving any less is any less appreciated. It's all very much appreciated because quite frankly, the vast majority of viewers give nothing. So the fact that anybody gives anything at any time is like really, really appreciated, unexpected, but appreciated. Let's see, what am I missing here? Did I miss one from Oystein? Yeah, we mentioned Kelly Stewart. I don't see. Getting messages, but I can't tell if they're, oh, they must be from yesterday. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're about 15 minutes away from being on for 3 hours, which is an hour past my normal bedtime. Middle of the afternoon here in Phoenix. Oh, there's a contribution from Oystein right there in the chat. Just turn your head. Oystein joins us from Norway. Thank you so much for your continued generosity with a 100 Norwegian krona contribution. He says, thank you so much for all you've shown us. Right on. Well, I hope it's helpful. Even if I didn't answer the issue with Gigabyte, we will come back. That one's special, needs special care. Oystein says no, it's his bedtime. Yeah, that I believe, sure. Norway's not further north than we are. Let's see. Edward Wallace says, I'm building this type of system, but so far not having luck with a power supply. Any ATX 3.0 power supply should be fine. If you're using an old power supply from an old build, it's a big mistake. Anytime you try and carry over, and he didn't say that he was, But anytime you try and carry over any parts from your old system to your new system and you're having a problem, it's always your old parts that are likely the cause of the problem. So any modern power supply should be fine. I would be surprised if you were using anything new and having a problem, at least a power supply problem. Without describing your problem, I really don't know that you're having a power supply problem. You're telling me you are, but I don't know what your information is based on. For all I know, you're having a completely different problem and wrongfully assuming that it's your power supply because you haven't told us what the problem is. You've not enabled us the opportunity to give you a suggestion. You've already concluded, you already know what the problem is, but your conclusion doesn't make any sense to me unless you're carrying over a very old power supply. So I don't know how helpful that is, but I do try to be honest and straightforward in answering your questions. Peter contributes €1. Thank you again, Peter, for all of your contributions today. Bajan Guy says, very nice job on these motherboards. Thank you to Mara as well for maintaining our chat room and answering your emails and doing our channel administration. She did the thumbnail for today's video and our video notes for today's video. I'm just scrolling back to see if there's any other questions. Now, if you have an older chip, and by the way, I didn't have time to get to it, but I also have a 9700K motherboard laid out like this, just because. And this is not an issue until you reach about socket 1700. I'm not exactly sure on 10th and 11th gen Intel chips, but it seems to me this started happening maybe about a year ago. Now, Intel's already discontinued the 13th generation, or they're going to discontinue, which is really weird because 13th gen hasn't been out very long. But because 13th gen is really just 14th gen, it's so stupid. Even though they still make 12th gen, they're going to stop making 13th gen. They never stopped making 13th gen. They just call them 14th gen now. So it's redundant to basically have two chips in the same family with different numbers. So I think May 24th, is it May 24th? Intel will no longer be shipping any 13th gen CPUs. It's really bizarre. You might find some really good prices on 13th gen CPUs because of that. When any existing inventories of chips runs out after manufacturing, they're just going to blow them out to get rid of them. So you might have some good deals ahead of you. And it's the same as a 14th gen, essentially, at a fraction of the price, potentially. Something to keep in mind. Not sure what they're thinking of over there at Intel, but making some very, very bizarre decisions. We'll wait and see what Intel says about all this, because people are having to send their chips back due to failure. And I suspect what you've witnessed today is the reason why. I could be wrong. I think it feels pretty obvious. This is unusual, unprecedented, and of course it's going to have unusual and unprecedented results. One fits the other. But it'd be nice to hear confirmation from Intel and what Intel's going to do about it moving forward. In the meantime, thanks again to our friends over at Acronis. If you haven't backed up your system, here's your reminder, back it up. Whatever you're using, I don't care. If you got nothing, grab Acronis, free trial. Try it. You want to buy it? It's a great price. You want to save 30% off that already great price? Use our coupon code or pay full price. I don't care. The notes are they're in the video notes for the links. And then, of course, save money on your Windows license keys, your Office license keys, 90% off from what Microsoft wants. Same keys. And then also, RoboForm, our friends at RoboForm with the password management software. I rely on RoboForm and have been for nearly 2 decades. There's no way I can remember all my logins and passwords. Are you kidding me? How do you do it? I use RoboForm. Free trial, download it, decide for yourself. 30% off for all new folks to RoboForm, and that's using our link in the video notes below. So my thanks to all of you for your memberships and your contributions and your participation in our chat room today, and for hanging out and just joining us on this little tech adventure and figuring out what the heck is going on. It's very different, it's unusual, it's uncommon, and it's trying to become the new normal. The next gen of chips from Intel, this isn't even possible. So this is just, if you're in the 12th, 13th, or 14th gen Intel or the latest AM5 AMD chips, the same motherboard makers are doing the same thing. Whether it's Intel or AMD, it's still going to be an ASRock board. It's still going to be Asus. It's still going to be Gigabyte. It's still going to be MSI. So don't think that you're immune simply because you bought Team Red instead of Team Blue. Unless you are using your chip without a motherboard, then that's a different story. But I'd love to hear how you're doing that. In the meantime, thank you guys again for hanging out. Thanks again to Mara, Oystein, Peter, or Buster. I should say Buster. We have all the Peters, all the Busters. Of course, our friend Oystein, each and every one of you, Gary Tatum, Frankie B, of course. And I've been leaving Frankie B's name out too often, so I'm kicking myself for that. Forgive me, Frankie. Thank you for your friendships, and thank you all for hanging out. That'll wrap it up for me for today. That'll wrap it up, and I will see you all again, I think, Thursday. If not, for sure on Friday. We're always live on Fridays at 1 o'clock Pacific time. That's 4 p.m. Eastern. We hope we'll see you then. If you haven't hit the like button, you haven't subscribed, please do so. That way you'll be alerted to anytime new content is posted, and you won't be missing out on other future content. And be sure and hit our video library. We have over 1,700 videos going back 16 years. You might find something in there you like. Or not. But take a look. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.